Hello, good morning everyone. It's very nice to welcome you here to the M&S archive. My name is Professor Sarah Underwood and I'm the Director of the Centre for Executive and Professional Education here at the Business School. And I'm incredibly pleased to be able to welcome Mark and David here to give the session this morning. I think it's absolutely perfect that we are in such a wonderful building. The M&S archive is the result of a long-standing partnership between Leeds University and M&S, and all their items were brought here in 2012. And since then, it's been an incredibly rich source of material for our students and our academics, and it helps to make sure that our academic research that's going on very much meets the commercial needs of such organisations. There are over 70,000 items here from M&S in huge stacks above where we're sitting right now, dating back to 1884. And it's one of the richest corporate archives that actually exists in the world. So we're incredibly lucky to have this here on university campus. And we tried to make the most of it. So we've had upwards of 8,000 student projects as a result of some of the work that goes on here in the archive. So for those of you who are students in the audience, this is really a fantastic place to come and work. And it's great that M&S still see the University of Leeds as somewhere that they can come and work with us to develop some of their academic research that they're doing. And so today's session is really to share with you some of the results of work that has been going on within M&S in their HR department. So it's really my job to speak very, very briefly and to welcome Professor Mark Stewart, who's coming to host this morning's session. He is one of our eminent professors in the business school, and I'm sure will give you a much more detailed introduction to his own background, and has been working for a long time in terms of the work and employment relations division here at the business school. So I'd like to say thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and I shall welcome Mark. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to today's event. I'm not going to spend too long talking today either, because I think we all want to hear what David's got to say. But to briefly introduce myself, I'm Professor Mark Stewart. I hold the Montague Burton Chair for Human Resource Management and Employment Relations at the Business School. And I'm also the Pro Dean for Research and Innovation. I think these events are great. I think it's great to be able to bring in leading people like David to talk about their experience in HR. And I'm sure we're all going to look forward to hearing what he's got to say today, particularly given the challenges that the retail sector is facing at the moment. Of course, there's all the global competitive challenges of being in business anyway. There's the little matter of Brexit, all these things that animate our day-to-day conversations. But I think retail is also at the forefront of some of the changes that are taking place in relation to technology in work, both in terms of the relationship between companies and customers. We all know that increasingly people are buying goods online, be that any types of good, but particularly perhaps food products. So you might not need to go into stores quite as often as you used to historically. So that changes the relationship, I think, with the customer. But technology is also clearly changing the nature of work. And I think if you're in HR these days, trying to tackle some of the digital challenges, what they may be, are particularly important. How do you use technology in relation to your workforce? Do you use technology quite simply to make people redundant and replace people by robots? Do you use technology to monitor your workers more effectively, to try to get a better understanding of how you can improve efficiency? Or can technology be used in a way which might lead to a more enriching workplace that allows perhaps improved flexibility, more creativity in terms of workers? So I think these are big issues within many organizations. Retail has its particular challenges, but I think the HR profession is at the forefront of some of these developments in work. So to briefly introduce David, who's had a long career in HR, Not that long, I don't want to make it sound like you're ancient, David. 30 years in the HR profession. David started in the Ford Motor Company, but he's had international assignments in Woolworths in Australia, and he spent a long period of time at Diageo PLC. He joined Marks & Spencer's as HR director in October 2006. And he's been really leading a major project around smarter working in Marks & Spencer's. So I'll hand over to David so that he can take us through the talk. And then we're going to have a Q&A afterwards, which I'll facilitate. So David, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mark and Sarah. I think Mark just gave me 10 extra years service with M&S. I actually joined in 2016, so I'm only 2 years in. So, and I like to say to new people, stay new for as long as you can. It helps you challenge everything. So I like to think of myself as new. I'm actually slightly less new than I was, but it's great to be here, particularly in this facility, and you know it's open to the public, so if you haven't already had a good look round, if you have the time at the end of this to look around, this is both the history of M&S, but it's also the history of retailing. And actually much of my talk today is going to focus on the future and how we're transforming, as Mark indicated. But actually I firmly believe that as a company with 134 years history, you also need to know how to draw on your heritage and be true to what the founders thought we should be, which, by the way, essentially could be captured in a phrase Sir Simon Marx used probably in the 30s, which is he said we're all about democratizing quality for the masses. Now, I'm not sure we'd use the word the masses in 2018, it sounds slightly dated language, but actually if you think about that, and we have thought long and hard about that as a leadership team, we should still be about that. And at various points in our history, I think where we've lost our way from that vision, we've perhaps got carried away with ourselves in terms of, oh, we need to be leading edge fashion, or we need to be, ultra premium food, or whatever. Where we've lost our way from democratizing quality, whether it be on the clothing side of the business or food, we've tended to not perform. So that would be one phrase I'd bear in mind in terms of M&S. I'm going to try and weave together a few themes today, and I have a few slides which hopefully will bring stuff to light. I've just done a click there, that's all right. I'm going to try and weave together a little bit of our history, just to remind ourselves where we came from and what we were special from, particularly in relation to our employee base. What's happening in the world of retail, you'll all have an opinion on that. One of the self-evident things is everyone's got an opinion on M&S, absolutely guaranteed, yeah? If I'm lucky enough to go to dinner parties, I get a welter of feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's just before the starter, So everyone's got an opinion on us, and we are all shoppers to a degree. So a little bit about the retail environment, a little bit about how we are transforming M&S, and then a little bit more about our people and, to Mark's point, smarter working, both for ourselves as well as how that touches the customer. Right, this is a predecessor of mine. This is a lady who's actually quite famous, and you'll have, I think, as you walk around, you will see references to Flora Solomon. I joke with my HR team that, do you not think I should have this job title? Staff and welfare. So it sounds particularly officious and scary. So some of them think I'm serious, actually, which says something about me, I think. But Flora Solomon was a very interesting character, and essentially was one of probably the key driver of what became a sort of employer brand, if you're familiar with that term for M&S, around looking after our people. It wasn't entirely altruistic, actually. Much of it was born of providing services to employees that meant they stayed in the store rather than went off to the dentist appointment that would take 3 or 4 hours. So it wasn't entirely altruistic, but it did establish M&S as a real employer of choice. That term was not used in those days. And we've moved forward through the years. You can see, where training was then focused on way back in the 30s, probably long before many companies were providing the sort of training that M&S started to do. And go to 1940, and way back then we were promoting women in the workplace. And yes, I don't think, again, we'd use the term a girl's future, if you can read that. So all of this is slightly dated, but the intent was there. And if you look at our shopper mix, of course, it is today still biased more towards females, and therefore our employee base is. Of course, one of my accountabilities is then to report, what's it like through the ranks, David? How many females do you have at senior levels? Oh, and by the way, what's your gender pay gap, etc. And beyond gender, what's your BAME representation? All those are fair questions, and all those are heavily on our agenda, and we take that very seriously. But I think we were ahead of our time in some of the thinking. And then we go fast forward to 1957. And investment in staff welfare. And one of the things that we're working on as a team, my HR team, is what is the 2018 version of that? It's tough to be unique, but actually, what is the 2018 version of that? And I'll talk a little bit later about issues like mental health, for example, that probably Flora and her team didn't think much about, but these days is clearly a key societal issue. And we have stats around our own employee base, and we can see mental health issues rising in line with, sadly, that they are in society. So we're working through, what's the modern version of what we did then. And just to sort of whisk through a few others, we introduced mobile breast screening units for employees, and actually surpassed what the NHS was providing in doing so. So again, it's both clearly relevant to our business, but also very relevant to a big chunk of our employee base. And then more recently, a new family care policy was launched in 1995, included longer maternity leave, paternity leave, etc., etc. Again, perhaps not unique to us, but generally ahead of the pack. One thing I will just dwell on briefly, because I think we should be particularly proud of it. We have a program called Marks and Start, which is essentially providing work experience for a whole variety of people, from the young to older, who are disadvantaged in some way. That might be a disability, that might be a family background, it might be poverty, it might be a mental or physical disability. And 50% of the people who go through that program, we partner with people like Prince's Trust and other charities, and 50% of the people who go through this work experience program end up getting a job with us. The other 50% either say, actually, thank you, but I'm not interested in retail. I hated that experience, or whatever, or it's not for me. Or we actually decide, actually, you're not going to quite fit for the following reasons. So it's not, again, it's not entirely altruistic. It's a useful talent pool for us. But it's something I think we're very proud of and should be. And we're talking quite big numbers, by the way. We're talking, over 1,000 a year. This is not sort of 10 people. This is across a whole range of stores. And there's some very inspirational stories. When I go to the award ceremonies, when they've completed their work experience, and you hear some of them are, actually by then confident enough to stand up and tell their story, there's never a dry eye in the house, actually. It's a very sort of interesting and touching piece of work that we do. And then, obviously, we've received the various awards that one does, and I think our commitment to corporate social responsibility is, again, a sort of signature of what we're about, and that's been captured in the last 10 years or so under the banner of Plan A. That comes from the Al Gore book, because there is no plan B, and the CEO at the time, Sir Stuart Rose, adopted that as a way of really capturing our corporate social responsibility programs. So I wanted to just whisk you through the history, because we're here in the archive, and I just thought it was relevant to sort of form that as a backdrop and bear that in mind as we move through now a whole load of stuff which is happening in retail, and how do we retain some of the essence of that history whilst transforming. And that's easy to say. If I say it quickly, it sounds really easy, but it's not easy to do. That first block may not be so easy to read. So transforming M&S. By the way, I say to our colleagues in M&S, there's nothing particularly special about the word transformation in retail at the moment. In other words, it's not unique to us. In fact, if you're a bricks and mortar retailer by heritage, if you basically own shops, and you're not transforming, you are dying, to be blunt. So actually, you better be transforming. And whether the Debenhams announcement this morning that you may have seen is you regard as transformation, I don't know, but I suspect it's much needed. They need to right-size their store estate, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second in relation to ourselves. So there's nothing particularly unique about the word transformation. In fact, probably it's an overused word. The real essence, actually, for us is speed. It's how quickly can we transform. Because we're a company with 134 years of history and heritage. We have a reputation, a deserved reputation, for being a bit slow. Internally, a bit slow, a bit bureaucratic. That's been the reputation. So the key for M&S is not whether, so a colleague asked me recently, so do you think this transformation thing is going to work, David? I said, I don't know, history will show that. I'm more confident now than I was a year ago, because I can guarantee you we've got a group of leaders who are determined to transform the business. So the will is there, but I don't think that's the key question anymore. The key question is, how quickly? Because if I gave good old M&S 50 years to transform, I might back us, yeah? We ain't got 50 years. We might not have 5 years. Yeah, the world is changing. We're also in, and my language is deliberate, by the way, because we're also in a new era of telling it the way it is. Because I think M&S, like a lot of large companies, certainly a lot of retailers, has been a bit guilty of treating its staff as children. And it's been a bit of an adult-child relationship, as opposed, a parent-child relationship, as opposed to adult. And you'd be amazed. If you tell people the way it is, do you know what? They already know. They might not be able to articulate it on a national scale, but they are serving customers every day in stores. If our women's wear range isn't good enough, or it's not available, see me afterwards, by the way, or if our pricing in food is out of kilter, they know it. They're hearing feedback every day. So if you talk about those issues on a national scale and what we need to change, you get furious nods from our colleagues. You don't get, I never knew. They aren't able to articulate. So I think treating, might sound obvious, but treating colleagues in an adult-to-adult way always pays back, in my experience. But retailers occasionally can slip into let's not worry them by talking about that. Almost never is the right thing to do. Obviously, you've got to be judicious about some pieces of information. That first light blue block, I need to change my colours because I doubt if you can read it. It's really critical block, though. It's called Restoring the Basics. There are a number of basics in M&S which are not good enough. Putting the dirty laundry out there for a second, excuse the pun. Availability in both food and clothing and home is probably our biggest single operational challenge right now. But I was at our M&S store in Leeds this morning, first thing, the Trinity store, and the new Holly collection, if you're interested. There's plenty of stock there. So that's my quick advertising break. But we are systematically working through availability as one example of an issue. Other issues in the Restoring the Basics block there include, yes, right-sizing our store estate. So we have announced some time ago, actually, that we will close about 100 stores over the next 3 to 5 years. We're about 40% of the way into that program. I was saying before we started that a little known fact is we currently have more stores in the M&S estate than we've ever had in our 134-year history. The Daily Mail won't print that, of course, because that's not as interesting as being able to report store closures. The reason for that is, of course, we continue to open a lot of Simply Food stores. And whether it be railway stations or motorway stations or your local high street, there are a lot of Simply Food stores. Obviously, they're smaller stores, but we do still have a very large store estate, about 1,100 stores, including franchise stores. But the truth is, new era of telling it the way it is, some stores are in high streets that are dying. Some stores are 70 years old. The investment required to bring them up to speed to be the brand, representative of the brand we want to be, we will not get a return on that. So that's the reality. If you happen to live in a community where we've closed your store, or we might be closing it, apologies. But in the fierce competitive environment we're in, trust me, it's the right decision for this brand. And I'll come on to talk about online in a second, because clearly that's a big part. So we are right in the depths of that first block, but we're also segueing into step 2. And my CEO refers to this transformation journey, you can see a 5-year timeline then, as a marathon, not a sprint. Now, we're trying to move quickly, and he's a South Londoner, so he seems to know the route of the London Marathon. I don't think he's ever run it, but he seems to know it. So he said we're on about mile 4, wherever that is, anyone who's run it, and he said we've still got that cobbled bit round Cutty Stark to go, if you know the race. So there's some bumps in the road. This is not easy. Human beings don't like change. We're driving a lot of change. The way we do it is important to us, and I like to think that we try to do that in the best possible way for our colleagues on that journey. For example, we've got a proud track record of redeploying employees to other stores. So every time a store shuts, actually the first thing we do is who can we redeploy? And a very high percentage of the time we can. Not always, but a high percentage we can. The Shaping the Future slide obviously talks to whether it be the store estate, our range in both clothing and food, and beginning to also really prepare ourselves for what is not a digital future, it's a digital today. And then ultimately, we want to make M&S special again. And there's a huge fount of goodwill towards this business, but we won't be able to trade profitably to the satisfaction of our shareholders on goodwill. Yeah? You can trade goodwill for a while, but you can't trade goodwill forever. By the way, if I'm sounding a bit doomy and gloomy, I'm not. I'm an optimist. If I take one category, lingerie, our market share in lingerie continues to go up and up. The women of Great Britain want to buy their underwear from us, as a general statement. The trouble is, too many of them then walk through women's wear on the way out the store. That's what we need to change. So category by category, you get a different picture depending on what you look at. Our food, the number of times people say, oh, I love M&S food, yeah? But is M&S food, we will never probably be most people's weekly shop, that's not our positioning, but actually we need to be a choice that's made more than just a special occasion. So again, democratizing quality, think of those words, we need to do more of that. I'll come back to this slide at the end just to sort of try and pull it all together. So what does that mean for the people agenda? How do I connect and my team connect the people agenda in M&S to that environment? So there's the vision for the business. And we've established 3 imperatives. Great talent. You can't win without the right team. Whether you're the store manager I was chatting to this morning, whether it's me and my department, whether it's the CEO, you can't win without the great talent. And that, for us, means a mix of very experienced, great M&S people. My CEO has been with the business 30 years. The guy who runs stores has been with the business about 25 years. These are not old people, by the way. The stores guy's in his 40s. The CEO's just turned 50. They're great M&S people, but we're also infusing new talent. So the managing director of our clothing and home business is about a year in. She's female, by the way. Our managing director of our food business is only about 6 months in. So we've brought a lot of new talent in. Because one thing about M&S is we have had a lot of long-serving people. We still do. And they should be proud of that, and we're very proud of them. But if you have too many very long-serving people, they just don't have a great benchmark on what great looks like. They don't have a natural benchmark externally. And what some of the newer people are bringing is that. Great looks like this, not just that. M&S does some great things, but not in all areas. So whether it be developing our people, hiring our people, developing leaders, that's what that block's about. The second one is developing a winning culture. I don't think M&S has always been as fiercely competitive, you might say many things about us, as fiercely competitive as some of our competitors. So if I take on the clothing side, Next, very well run business over many years. They are good retailers, and I think they're innately more competitive and commercial than we've been. That's not good enough. We need to change that. On the food side, actually, the list is endless. You know, for every Tesco and Sainsbury's and Morrison's and Asda, you've now got Aldi and Lidl, and they're scared of them. And so thinking that we're above all that. Waitrose and ourselves, we're above all that. You're never above anything. If the margin structure in the market is dropping, and it is because of the discounters, ultimately that impacts you. You know, your positioning can be above them, and it should be because we have much better food, by the way, better quality, but actually you're never untouched by the market. So there's a lot in there, but I would just call out the third bullet point there, if you can read it, promoting colleague health and well-being. This is not just the hard edge of we need to be, you know, more competitive. We need to be more performance outcome focused. It's also actually, we still need to care about our colleagues, because actually everyone says they're a people business. We really are. And if we haven't got the right people with the right passion and the right belief in the business, we won't win. So caring about our colleagues matters to us. And the last one would be a flexible and low-cost organisation. And I must admit, this is year 2 of this strategy. In year 1, I fudged it. I think I called it a flexible and agile or cost. I can't remember what I said. It wasn't. It was a flexible and I fudged the low-cost point. What did I call it? A flexible and lean organisation. So I said, actually, we're playing with language. Call it the way it is. It's low cost. Doesn't mean our products will be low cost. It means the organisation that supports M&S needs to be low cost. Our margin structure is not any richer than anyone else's, in truth. So I just wanted to give you a flavour for what's on the people agenda. Conscious of time, so I'm going to move through a bit quicker. Becoming a digital-first retailer is something that we've stated we need to be. So yeah, we've got that store estate of over 1,000 stores, but actually, of course, all things digital are touching our lives. One big debate we've had, which is worthwhile, is internally, it sounds a bit arcane, but we've debated the word digital and online, because I think we were using it interchangeably. Actually, online retailing is critical, and I'll come on to that. But digital touches everything. So if you wanted to know how I pay for my lunch every day when I'm in the office, we have a store now below our head office. Don't know why I'm logging in. I'm just going to show you. I have an app on there that means I just scan the product and go, because it's got my account details. I don't know, but I'll make a prediction that in large stores, tills might not exist in retail in 5 years' time. Because this technology, we're all completely impatient, yeah? So actually we've replaced a lot of course we've got tills manned by people, we've got self-checkouts. Actually the future is just pay on your phone. So watch out for that, because we're beginning to roll that out across stores. So that's not an online sale, that's use of digital. We've got a fascinating, we call it a retail lab in our Marble Arch store. Some of you may know Marble Arch. And we're lucky enough to have lots of space above. So we use part of a floor for a retail lab, which is solely focused on digital development in store. And one of the more interesting things is we've got a magic mirror in there, which they're looking to see if we can commercialise and roll out. And essentially it delays. So if I might not try on a dress, but just go with it for a minute. If I tried on a dress and looked in the mirror in the normal way, but I want to apparently, some of us want to see what it looks like from behind. If you want to do that, you turn around and there's a delay on the mirror. So you can turn back around and see what you look like from behind. It's simple. Of course, the technology is not that simple. But so we're trialing all sorts of things, whether it be till systems or mirrors. And so think about digital in the broadest sense of the word, including my own function. You know, I think Mark's right to his opening comments around what does that mean for colleagues in the digital age. And so it spawns all sorts of thinking. So I think it's a long-winded way of saying digital doesn't equal online. Digital is a much broader topic, and online is a critical component of that. On online specifically, however, we have set ourselves a goal of 1/3 of our business coming from online in the next 3 to 5 years. On clothing at the moment, just to put that into perspective, we're at about 20%. So about 20% of sales are online. Initiated online. That could be for in-store collection or home delivery. Food, we're much lower, because the key with food is we could do online food tomorrow. The key thing is, can we do it profitably? And if you think of our relative, what we call basket sizes, how much people spend with us on the food side, it's way lower than your typical weekly shop at Tesco. So even some of the bigger players have found it commercially difficult to deliver online, but they do it. We think we haven't missed out yet, but we think we're going to have to crack that. We need to crack it in an M&S way. So more news to come. We're working through that. So there's a food online challenge for us, as with everyone. And of course, the real trick is to make the move between channels, as we call it, seamless. So that if I am ordering online and I want to collect in store, is that journey seamless? And of course, we all call ourselves customer-focused and customer-centric. But typically, and again, I'm sharing this as friends with you, you won't tell everyone this. Typically, if you go into one of our stores, the collection point in a large store is the customer service desk, which might typically be on the second or third floor back left. It's not actually very convenient for you. Where it should be, if I'm standing in your shoes, is right inside the front door. And then you talk to a store manager who's been brought up to think this way and say, yeah, but by walking through the store, we might be able to sell them something more. I said, no, you've misunderstood my journey. I just want convenience on this trip. I might come to you, if you don't hack me off completely, I might actually come back to your store when I've got more time and shop it. So if you say customer centricity really quickly, you think you've cracked it. In my mind, in my view, it's quite a deep mindset to get there. So all things digital are preoccupying us, and we've just appointed a brand new job, Chief Digital and Data Officer, because the word digital also, I think, underpinning that is an unbelievable opportunity that everyone has to, for want of a better word, use data to drive insight, to drive decision making across everything. And actually, as an HR director, I would say, in my top 1 or 2 priorities is how do we make better data-driven decisions in HR. Someone once said to me, finance have had a 50-year head start on that to HR, but actually, if I have no data to back up whatever my opinion is, it's just my opinion against yours. And actually, everyone's got an opinion on people, a bit like marketing. So actually become more data savvy and interrogating data in every part of M&S is a huge push. For information, we've formed a number of partnerships to help speed the journey. Some of it is supporting what we do. So people like Founders Factory, which is the Brent Hoberman is the guy who drives that. And True, these are sort of start-up businesses that we're involved in. Also, they promote start-up businesses and enable them. We have a big partnership with Microsoft, so one of the products of that is the Scan Pay Go technology I talked about earlier. And Tata, enormous technology company, 400,000 employees. I was lucky enough to go to India recently to see them because I have a big project in my own patch, and the resources they have available is unbelievable. They've got a campus just in Chennai alone with 35,000 people on it. And I asked them actually around robotics and artificial intelligence, how was that going to affect their outsourcing business? Because actually low-level tasks done by people in the UK being outsourced to India with a wage arbitrage that you typically get a saving, surely the future is that those tasks will be done by robot, chatbots and the equivalent. And they said absolutely. And they weren't defensive about it. They said, we're in the technology business, so being in denial about that is not where we should be. They were embracing that and saying, but it will spawn a whole load of other jobs and activities around advancing that technology and supporting it. And then on the right-hand side, this is more the how we do it. Big conversations about agile with a capital A. It's important that people understand that. That is a very particular methodology to speed decision-making, with fundamental implications for leaders, because basically I've got to give up control, which feels very uncomfortable for those of us who have had control for years. And Decoded is an organisation that's particularly helping with our data journey. So we've set up a data fellowship with them, and they're helping speed that journey. So we're doing a lot of stuff with lots of partners who know a lot more than us, and it's all about speeding the journey. So briefly, all of that means we're also changing the way we work. So actually pontificating about how the customer journey is going to change without actually changing the way we work didn't feel quite right. So for my sins, I don't quite know how I got this one, but it's been okay. I've been the sponsor of something called the Smarter Working Project, which to date has largely focused on our London offices, which has become a London office, or two actually, but actually has resonance across our store estate. And essentially it's to drive a more flexible and collaborative way of working that suits us, our colleagues individually, our teams and our customers. It's not a charter for the individual having flexibility at the expense of the team they're in or ultimately the customer. And that's a balance that's quite important that you don't get carried away with. Where did we start from? Well, we had 4 London offices. So I just said, let's be a low-cost organisation. 4 London offices? It doesn't make any sense at all. So we've now got 1 London office, the head office in Paddington Basin, and we have a tech centre out at Stockley Park near Heathrow. Otherwise, we've exited the 2 other buildings. And you can see some of the other changes. We had a traditional canteen. We had lots of symbols of hierarchy. Number 1, offices. So senior people had offices. Junior people did not. We now have no offices. And the first bit of the building to change was where the senior people were. And someone said, David, isn't that going to look like favouritism? I said, no. It means any other senior person who thinks they want an office, they can form an orderly queue at my desk. But the CEO hasn't got an office, and nor's the chairman. So I reckon there won't be a queue, and there wasn't. It's good, it's just a simple bit of change management. But there was lots of symbols of hierarchy, which we're trying to do away with. We weren't using space effectively. There wasn't as much collaboration. We're still driving that. I don't think we're there yet, but it's getting better. Wasn't cost effective, etc. So we have created a more modern environment. Our reception area is actually just being completed at the moment, so I'm hoping once that goes live, there will be a wow factor for people. And actually the acid test is a new colleague joining, how do they feel about that working environment? Does it feel like, oh, actually I thought M&S was going to be a bit stuffy and old-fashioned. It doesn't feel that way. By the way, we will have some of our heritage and history, some of the stuff that you see here, also visible in that office, because that's important to us. And the innovation through the years, I think there's a wall around there around how we've innovated over time in both food and clothing. That's really important to us. So I won't talk through the detail of this, but essentially the headlines are flexibility. So flexible about the way we work. We were very desk-bound. Technology allows you a lot more flexibility. We have a lot of real estate called stores all around the country. And shared service centres. There are lots of places where individuals can work. They can also work from home. Now, they've got to do things like that so long as they are not, letting the team down or not being effective in doing that and ultimately letting the customer down. So there's no rules. Greater collaboration, very siloed organisation. You tend to get that in traditional hierarchies. I used to say in a previous organisation, if you salute upwards and tell downwards, you can probably survive here for about 30 years. The trouble is you don't look sideways. And the customer doesn't care about our org chart, doesn't give a monkeys. They care about the horizontal journey from choosing something to finding it's available, to the service they get, to the payment they get, or the delivery to home, whatever it might be. Technology, I think we're scoring about 6 out of 10 on this at the moment. We have adopted Skype. We've done away with desk phones. It's all Skype enabled. I'm still not sure it's connected around the store estate in the way that we should. And activity-based working, so allocating the space based on people's activities, not just based on numbers of heads. So if I took our property team as an example, they had the lowest ratio, meaning you take their head count, call it 100, they only have 50 desks for 100 people. Why? Because they're out and about all over the country. You don't need Joe Bloggs to have a desk. So they've got half the number of desks than people. This is not rocket science. Many others have done it. I'm sure you're aware of that. So what we're creating essentially is a new colleague experience, a modern working environment that's more collaborative. The picture of Percy Pigs, just worth a quick mention. We've got underneath, come to our building by the way, you're very welcome. There's a shop underneath now that's open to the public as well as our staff. And on the other side is a colleague-only sort of lounge. And we ran a competition to name it, and the winner was Percy's, so that's why it's called Percy's. And here's a few quotes that I'll just let you read around, so what are colleagues saying about And this is a real challenge because the people at the top of the organisation, including myself, we have worked and been successful in a different environment where actually you did come to work at least 5 days a week and you were visible and actually were your inputs measured more than your outputs. And we did have career paths, and that's good, although it's not for everyone. You meet a lot of digitally savvy people, they tend to be younger, but not always, who actually aren't interested in career paths. They're interested in really exciting work for 2 or 3 years, and then they want to move on. So, us pumping some 20-year career path at them, not that we would do that, actually, that's the wrong audience. Now, other people do want a career path, so I think it's really challenging those of us who've developed careers in a different era to develop something that is relevant for the people that you're talking to. So lots of positives. We've done some evaluation. Far more expert people than me have done. This is an industry methodology, the Leesman study. I won't bore you with the methodology, except to say we have been studying both the before and after impact of these changes on our colleagues in terms of their effectiveness. This score actually is related to the tech hub out at Stockley Park. We'll be running the same survey. We've done the before, we'll be doing the after on the head office very soon. And you can see there's a significant jump from where we were to where we are, and we're now well over the benchmark. So it appears to be working. Before I close, I just wanted to make a quick mention, going back to the beginning of the Flora Solomon work and the development through the ages. What are we doing now around some of the areas of caring for colleagues? And I reference mental well-being, and we're running a large number of initiatives to ensure that we're providing the right support to what is clearly a growing issue in society, and us being able to respond to it, not presenting ourselves as experts, because that's dangerous territory, but either access to advice through us or directing people to real experts and being able to talk about it. And we've got some good senior leadership modelling in space like this, which is really important. So that Dare to Care logo we created. Obviously, physical well-being hasn't gone away either. And so, again, a number of initiatives there. I think more in where we're trying to put our money and attention is proactive stuff, as opposed to purely just piling more money into healthcare provision, which is hugely expensive. And the commercial reality is you're always going to be constricted on that. So we do some of that, but actually we're trying to invest more time and attention in the preventative stuff. Social well-being, a range of initiatives there. That's a picture of me, I've just realised, top left. That's presenting an award to a Scottish guy who's done some great work actually on mental well-being in Scotland for men, and being able to talk about it. But a variety of other initiatives. And lastly, financial well-being. We employ large numbers of people. Yes, they're paid actually reasonably well above the minimum wage, but they're not incredibly well paid. And to that degree, M&S is representative of UK society in terms of income levels. And of course, financial concerns are uppermost in people's minds. So, we can provide lots of career development, we can provide lots of well-being activities. Actually, if you're an average customer assistant in one of our stores, you're still worried about how much you're earning because you've got to pay the rent or possibly the mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. So we can't just keep raising pay rates, 20% ahead of the market, as much as I'd love to. We actually pay rather well relative to other retailers, but actually helping people with some financial advice has sort of grown in importance to us. So let me just finish by referring back to the Transforming M&S side. Hopefully the picture you've got is of an organisation that's actually become, in a good way, rather restless in a retail market that is changing dramatically. I've managed to get through this presentation without mentioning Amazon, by the way, but the reality is the biggest single threat to all retailers is Amazon, and for Amazon, read equivalent online players. ASOS would be a good example in clothing. And Amazon don't compete on the same basis as the rest of us. They famously didn't make a profit for many, many years. They make huge amounts of money from their databases, forget selling stuff. So actually, I think if you're Jeff Bezos, making money out of the stuff that he sells is not his biggest priority. So we're not competing on a like-for-like basis. And what I think you will find is you're already finding actually, interesting alliances developing that you wouldn't have expected 5 or 10 years ago. You know, whatever is decided on the Asda-Sainsbury's tie-up will be decided. But, you know, there's two fairly fierce competitors who are talking to each other, Tesco, Booker. But then perhaps even more interestingly, partnerships between bricks and mortar retailers and tech companies, us with Microsoft. I think Walmart, I want to say Google, have joined forces. And it's all in a bid to try and counter the inexorable rise of Amazon, who you might say you might love, by the way, because they actually provide an amazing service. They might need to pay a bit more tax, but that's for another day, probably another speech. Transforming M&S, we are deadly serious about. We think the British people will support us in that venture. That will come with some pain, but we're deadly serious about doing it. So hopefully I've tied a few themes together there. Thank you for your attention, and I think we're going to try and have a few minutes of questions, but I'll hand back to Mark. Thank you.